than what was originally planned. And so, yeah, today it's not going to be like a full message. Maybe this one's a little more sturdy. But I want to share some thoughts, and we'll see where we all end up. I've been in Psalm 106 in the last while, on and off, and there's some things, or kind of one theme there that I want to kind of pull out this morning, and that's the whole idea of how we need to be reminding ourselves and each other about the things that God has done. We need to be reminding ourselves of all the ways that the Lord has, even as we read Scripture, the way that the Lord, and here in Psalm 106, I mean, it's specifically about the Israelites, but we need to be constantly reminding ourselves and each other about kind of who God is and what He's done and what He's doing. I'm not going to read the whole psalm. But there's a few times in the psalm where it's kind of talking about the things that the Lord has done, and then it says, I'll read a few verses here and there throughout the psalm, but it says in verse 7, it says, "When our fathers were in Egypt, they gave no thought to your miracles. They did not remember your many kindnesses. They rebelled by the sea, the Red Sea." And so there's kind of this connection of they forgot. They weren't remembering. They forgot about the way that God had done miracles, the way that God had come through for them in the past. They forgot, and then it led to into rebellion. And I think it's something that we would do well to kind of to ponder that and to consider and to not fall into the same trap or situation. It says, I'll continue reading here for a little bit in verse 8. It says, "Yet He saved them for His name's sake, to make His mighty power known. He rebuked the Red Sea, and it dried up. He led them through the depths as through a desert. He saved them from the hand of the foe, from the hand of the enemy He redeemed them. The waters covered their adversaries, not one of them survived. Then they believed His promises and sang His praise. But they soon forgot what He had done and did not wait for His counsel." And so then here again, they go into this cycle of they forgot, and then they went back into sin. And then it comes again where it says later on in verse 21, it talks again about how they forgot. They forgot the God who saved them, who had done great things in Egypt, the miracles in the land of Ham, the awesome deeds by the Red Sea. And here in this passage, I just was kind of struck by the connection of there seems to be this connection of not remembering, forgetting what God had done, but then that kind of connected to the rebellion and falling away and going into sin. And I just think it's really important that we remind ourselves by washing ourselves in the Word, but also speaking and testifying to what God is doing in our own lives. It's really important, I think, that we sometimes stop and think and consider all the ways in which the Lord has come through for us in our lives. All the different ways, because I know sometimes I can get discouraged and I'm getting down, and I'm maybe in a place where I'm wondering what in the world to do about this and that and the other thing. But yet it's so good to stop and ponder and reflect about all the times in the past when I was in all kinds of different situations, but wondering what in the world to do in one way or another. and yet how God came through. Not always right when I wanted him to, not always the way that I wanted him to, but he came through, and looking back, you can see that God was so faithful. And it's important that we do that kind of just within our own hearts, like just remind ourselves, but it's also important that we share with one another and testify. Like even like it says in Revelation 12:11, like, they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. They did not love their lives so much as to shrink from death. But I think there's that thing of testifying about, and that can be different things. We need to be just faithful in proclaiming the word of the Lord, but we also need to proclaim our testimony, our lived experience of experiencing God's faithfulness and how, and I think it's something that's important that we do. And like Robert said, I want to, here in a few minutes, I want to just have some time to share. And I want us to remember that when we, and I'm not trying to put anybody on a guilt trip, you need to share something no matter what. No, that's not all what I want to do. But there's this thing that when we hold back, we're not just holding, like it's not just, you're holding it back from encouraging the rest of the body. And I think it's important that we share, and sometimes it's maybe we don't feel like it, or we're not sure if we should or whatever, but there's times when we should share, because it blesses and encourages the rest of the body. And if we just hold on to it for ourselves, it's keeping it from them. But I think, even in Revelation 12:11, where it talks about how they overcame by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, I think there's something about us declaring God's faithfulness. There's something about, I think it's about declaring the word, the gospel, whatever, declaring the word of the Lord, but it's also about declaring, I think it's about our testimony, testifying to how God has been faithful to us, sharing that, and that does something. We need to. Even last night at prayer meeting, we talked and prayed about just how we're in Matthew 24, but we have some great testing coming along our way. Some of us are being tested in very significant ways right now, even people in our midst. But there's something about just reminding ourselves and declaring the truth of God's faithfulness and what He has done, how He has been faithful in the past. We need to keep remembering these things, and I think that strengthens us to face. It helps us keep things in perspective. We want to have that eternal focus. We want to have our focus on God, and so that no matter what kind of troubles and pressures come, we know that God is faithful. We can all say that, we know God's faithful, but we need to have that fresh, living experience, and it doesn't, and not that every day is an experience of God's faithfulness. In some ways it surely is, but we aren't always going to feel like we have this alive, vibrant testimony. Sometimes there's seasons where it just feels really, really dark and really, really difficult. But again, we have this blessed hope. We know that there is hope. We know that God can make a way. God will make a way. It's not always the way that we would desire. I think we can all agree that we love to read about the stories. Even so, the Israelites, different things. Even the sea was split. Well, they would probably much rather have had that God intervened and hadn't had the Egyptians ever come on the scene. They wouldn't have had to been right there, right breathing down their neck, so to speak. They would have preferred that they just never would have made it till them. That would have been much, much easier. But yet, no, it was a last minute, thing where just kind of barely, but yet it was a powerful thing because God just destroyed the whole army right there in front of the Israelites. Behind them, whatever you want to look at it. But, Daniel in the lion's den. And Daniel probably would have much preferred not having to have been thrown into the lion's den. God could have intervened and just saved, they wouldn't have had to actually end up down there. And I think it's important that there's all these stories, there's so many stories in the Bible where we can, if we try and put ourselves into the story, we would much prefer God had intervened earlier and hadn't had to. But yet, at the same time, the reason why these stories are so interesting is because of it came down to, like, it was either God or they were really in the place where either God would come through or they were dead. And I think we would do well to keep reminding ourselves and each other too that yes, God is faithful, and yet we might be in situations where it's very, very painful and where it's very, very difficult and we don't even know. We can't see. We can't see the end. We can't see the path. And yet, but that doesn't mean that God isn't at work. That doesn't mean that God doesn't have a plan. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't have faith. God wants us to have faith and believe Him that He will. I mean, He's the God of miracles, the God of breakthrough. And we want to just keep that in mind. We want to encourage and remind each other about the goodness of God, His faithfulness. And I think that it's a powerful thing when we as the church, when we testify and we remind each other of, hey, you know what, I was in this place, but God came through. I mean, in the moment I felt like this and this, it was really difficult. I felt like I was losing hope or faith, but God did come through. This is very important that we share with one another these sorts of things. And I want to take even some time this morning just to do exactly that, to just share. And it doesn't have to be like testifying. I mean, there was an evangelism evening again this last week, and if people would want to share even just something about that, it doesn't have to, the sharing doesn't have to be, it's just a general time of sharing, just testifying about God's goodness and how what He's been doing, showing us, teaching us, helping us, whatever it is. But I would love to have a time of sharing, and so I think I've said here what I wanted to say. I'm just going to close in prayer here, and I think we can put the live stream off after that, and then we're going to have just a time of sharing here. But God, I just want to thank You for Your faithfulness, and God, I ask You that You would continue to teach and train us in how to do things Your way, how to partner with You, to hear what You're saying even in Your Word, and that we would have the eyes to see Your faithfulness towards us in so many different ways, and then that we would make the effort to testify about it, that we'd be willing to tell of Your goodness, God, and of Your faithfulness. God, I just pray that You'd keep on teaching us in this area, that Your testimony, Lord, would flow freely off of our lips, that we would be willing to encourage and bless others by sharing of our experience with You and Your faithfulness, God. Thank You that You are faithful. You have always been, You will always be. You are faithful, Lord, and I just want to say thank You.